Welcome to She Became Visible. This is a quick introduction because I'm going to be inserting a lot of slides. And so I just wanted to let you know that it is June 24, 2024, and I attended the women's strike today in Salt Lake, and I'm going to be reporting on that. And that's what this podcast is about today. So thank you for joining me today on She Became Visible. Today was definitely about becoming visible. So I hope you enjoy the show. Thanks so much.
You're wearing a sweater that was selected for you by the people in this room from a pile of stuff.
Give me a full ballerina skirt and a hint of saloon, and I'm on board.
I have a hole in my stomach!
I can't go back.
Welcome to the She Became Visible podcast. I'm your host, Renee Steelman. This podcast is my story. It's your story. It's our story. It's all the stories of all the women who one day knew that it was time to remember who they were, who they are, and stand up and be seen.
Hey, welcome back. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the strike that I attended today at the Salt Lake stairs. What do they call them? The front steps to the Salt Lake. Beautiful, beautiful building, I must say. I love when they came out and got on the big megaphone and said, "Governor Cox, come out and talk to us." And of course, he did not do that. So I'm going to be showing you some different slides, and it's a very casual podcast this evening. And I think I'm going to have to be doing a lot of editing, but because my desktop is an absolute mess. It has got so many things on it that I have been putting in for the next few podcasts that I want to do. And so it is just way too busy, which is perfectly fine for my attention deficit brain, but not for most people. So I do not know why this is not loading. My pictures are not loading. Oh, well, okay, that's interesting. My pictures aren't loading. I'm going to get rid of that. And then I'm going to bring on, okay, hold on. Let's see what we can do here. Let's do a pause. Okay, here we go. Okay, back home after going to the women's healthcare protest on the Salt Lake Capitol stair steps. And it's hot out there. But the women that went to all the trouble to organize this, I can't say thank you enough. I mean, they even brought water, they brought t-shirts, they brought signs, and it was a small group. They went to a lot of work. It wasn't a huge crowd. There weren't a lot of people, but there were some things that were brought up that made me start to think a little bit. And one of them was, how do you describe or how do you define conservative values? When you talk to someone, what does that mean when you hear the idea of conservative values? And so I looked it up, and one of the definitions was traditional, something that's considered accepted by a lot of the people and carried on through generations. Let me see if I can actually find the description that they gave. Because I thought, well, let's see. traditional values that is neutral to religion, agnostic to politics, and nonetheless faithful to the culture, that by being scolded and ridiculed when not forcibly obliterated, testifies always to the robustness of its effect and the resilience of its pedigree. And I think that's a good description, because what they're saying is this has been a proven act or tradition that has proven to be successful, that these values, these actions, this cultural thing that we practice has been proven to be successful generation after generation after generation. And so I thought, okay, how does that affect what I'm hearing on the media about what traditional values are? What the Project 2025 is saying, that they're going to go back to traditional values. And so I have to think, well, what is it about the term traditional values that creates so much hate and division? So I found this fabulous article. It's written by Asher Black. It's just a 7-minute read, so if you wouldn't mind, I'm actually going to read it to you. It's called, What Are Traditional Values Anyway? And he says, first, let's dispel the prohibition on such questions. Tradition in this context gets short shrift, but mainly from people who don't know what it is. Modernists dismiss it cynically as superficial or hypocritical. Traditionalists misrepresent it as including pet biases, political preferences, and religious peculiarities. What is dismissed necessarily exists, and what is misunderstood has at least one time been understood. So, what is it meant? What is meant by traditional values? Before the list, we should point out the modernist will circumvent the question by asking, whose tradition? Whose culture? We recognize this as a failure to distinguish traditions from tradition and cultures from culture. Let's say for the moment that our placeholder is Western tradition or American tradition, just to provide ammunition to such a challenge. We can afford to indulge the misunderstanding because when these questions are addressed to long-standing established bodies of identifiable thought, they're reasonable and can be answered. We shall shortly do so. When they are merely rhetorical attempts to suggest that there do not exist such generally unified bodies of thought, but all are susceptible to nihilistic deconstruction ad infinitum, it's merely a form of begging the question, and we can dismiss the dismissal. It's true that genetities exist within the Homo genus, but it's also true that a constellation of minority attitudes indicates the presence of a majority one. In the same way, divergent reactions underscore an original action, just as exceptions prove a rule. So here's the list. What are traditional values? Know your duty and do your duty. Keep your word and don't lie. Your yes is yes, no is no. Your word counts. Don't cheat or expect something for nothing. Deal fairly. Don't steal or take more than your share. Pay what you owe. Be aware of other people. It's the basis of courtesy. Courtesy and respect for elders are the default position. Pick up after yourself and respect others' space and property. Keep others' confidences and respect their privacy. Don't add to others' burdens or intentionally inconvenience them. Exercise discretion. Don't slander and don't gossip. Be sincere. Don't be proud or put on airs. Honor another person's loved ones and family. Do right by those who depend on you. Defend and protect those at disadvantage or weaker than yourself. Keep your speech and your heart clean and civil. Be moderate in all indulgences of body, senses, or mind. Don't shrink or flinch from hard work and pay an honest wage. Learn your whole life and respect scholarship in others. Do your civic duty and fulfill community obligations. Participate in the defense of your home when called upon to serve. Learn honor and integrity. It's all these things. If you fail morally or otherwise, resolve to do better. Now, if they were proposing that this list be put up in all elementary schools, I would be 100% behind that. This list isn't meant to be flawlessly stated or comprehensive. Instead, it provides a reasonable approximation of the basic expectations of previous generations for a standard of public and private behavior that ensures a workable society of livable communities of responsible individuals. So then he says the hypocrisy argument. But people who espouse these standards frequently don't adhere to them. Agreed, he says. A sports team values winning but doesn't always do it. They try, you say? Well, yes. So the argument is reduced to not everyone tries. Again, agreed. And when people don't even try to uphold these values, they don't hold the values. It's not about failure to adhere. It's about not committing to them in the first place. And when that's the case, the general reaction of those who do is sorrow or disgust. In other words, the exceptions prove the rule. Albeit when someone holds many or most of the values, excepting one or two, the tradition is still upheld, but the understanding of the individual is incomplete. So then he goes on to give the ambiguity argument. There's no clear definition of vague terms like honor, dignity, and respect. Love is vague concept too, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist or that people are never aware of when they are receiving or experiencing it. And I don't think I'm going to go ahead and read the thing. But he definitely goes on to say, he says, if you're going to argue that these are old-fashioned, don't account for today's context, and we probably need new values, this assumes all traditions are merely cultural. Times do change, but human nature does not. To the degree that these values address the fundamental options within that nature, they are timeless. And that's where I'm going to finish it. So I noticed when he made this list, he did not address a certain religion, a certain sexual preference, or even an identity. These were just human values. And so I think and I thought this was an absolute beautiful, again, this is an article, look it up. It's written by Asher Black, and it was written November 15th, 2018. So I'm sure if you Google that, you can find it. And like I said, it's just a 7-minute read. But so when I hear people right now, there's a lot of political things going on the television, and they're talking about, I am a conservative and I have traditional values. And I thought, what does that mean? Does that mean that you disqualify LGBTQIA people? Does that mean that you marginalized women or what their value or what their roles are? Is that a traditional value? I don't see that on Asher's list. And so when I went to this march today, there were a few men. There were some wonderful men there supporting their wives, girlfriends, daughters. But of course, primarily it was women. And they had an opportunity to share their individual stories. And many of their stories we all reflected. They were all things that we too had experienced. And I think the scariest thing is it's 2024. And I have 7 granddaughters. And I cannot believe that in this day and age, the progress that has been made has slowly been pushed back and is going to be pushed back even further, not slowly. And that's a concern. So I'm just going to share a few things from the march today. I just wanted to give a few little personal thoughts that were running through my head. And I hope they make you think. And I would love to get your comments on those. Thanks so much.
Over 260 firefighters.
Okay. I got to turn around because the sun is giving me a silhouette. Okay. So I can't, for some reason, my pictures that I took on my phone are not transferring to my computer, so I can't transfer them. But I'm going to show you. Let's talk about this. So this is what I attended today, and I think this is something that's very interesting. The reason your grandmother didn't leave your grandfather has less to do with some moral compass or love than you think. Until 1964, an employer could refuse to hire you because you were a woman. Until 1974, refusing to sell a woman a home was legal. Until 1988, you could refuse to rent to a woman with children. Contrary to what people believe, women didn't stay because relationships were better. They stayed because society wasn't designed for their acceptance. And this is a picture of my grandmother and my grandfather. Now, this is a picture of my grandmother at my wedding. And this is a story. This is a fun story to tell. So I grew up just south of Chicago, and my grandmother she was the civil defense director for Grundy County in Morris, Illinois, which is where I was born. And so she loved being the civil defense director. She loved the whole business. She had her little office, and I used to go down to her office, which was right below the apartment that they lived in. And she had her desk, and she was really, this is right after World War II. And my grandmother was born in 1900. And so she was really into the Eisenhower anti-communist movement. And so she was really big. Civil defense was all about being prepared and protecting ourselves from the communist scare. And she loved it, and she received a lot of awards for it. Now, my grandmother had 8 children. I don't think she had 8 children by choice, but having been born in 1900, there was no other role or course for her to follow. Now, my grandfather, he was gone a lot, and I have memories of him, but not necessarily fond memories. But I loved my grandmother, and he was just kind of in the background, and he had a little bit of a scruffy attitude. And I don't think he was really, even his own children have a lot of good things to say. And there was a long period of time where he left my grandmother and their children and went to Kentucky to find work. And he worked on trucks and diesel and all kinds of machinery. And so he went there to find work. But I think there was just a long separation. And I think if we were flies on the wall, there was a lot of hanky-panky going on both sides of the country here. But regardless, I'm just saying that my grandmother, having been born in 1900, didn't have a lot of choices. And I think it's fascinating if you look at the record of how women's rights have progressed, that having been born in 1900, and she died in the 80s, I want to say 1983 is when she died. So she saw a lot of things. And I never thought that my lifetime that I would be saying to my children, did you know that when your dad and I got married in 1974 that I couldn't get a credit card, or that I couldn't open up my own checking account without his signature? I couldn't go out and buy a car because I basically was a housewife. I didn't have income. Everything was his income. And so he had to sign off. I didn't even understand that when we got married and I took on his name, it was because I became his property. And now I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because I think it's nice to have you and your husband and your children all have the same last name. Makes it a lot easier to do genealogy. But I'm just saying that in my lifetime, in 70 years, a lot of things have happened for women's rights. And what I'm witnessing today is seeing a lot of those things go away. And so the reason that my cousin and I are both in that picture is because, let me go back, is because we were living in Illinois and we were both getting married the same year. And my mother said, well, it's really too expensive for all of our families to drive back out to Salt Lake City for you guys to get married, because that was the closest temple to Illinois at that time. And so why don't you guys get married on the same day? And then the family only has to go out to Salt Lake once. And so, of course, being, a nice, obedient daughter, I was like, okay. And it turned out to be it was fine. I mean, it was great. But everything that happened was because I organized it, and my cousin did nothing. And every time I was living in Japan, I was in the military at the time, and I would write her letters and I would say, hey, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? And I would hear nothing back. So it was just a chaos. The whole weekend was just chaos, because we had tried to incorporate 2 different groups of people at the same time. Even though we were the same family, that was my mom's family, but any other extensions of who she was marrying and their family, those all got thrown together and it was a huge mess. So anyway, but that's another example of, well, we had to drive all the way to Salt Lake City to get married rather than just getting married in Washington State where I was living. And then she could have gotten married in Illinois where she was living, and they could have done their own thing and we could have done our own thing. But because of this whole, no, you must be buried in the temple, and the closest temple at that time was Salt Lake. So anyway, that's that story. So I'm going to remove this. And so I don't think that I'm going to be able to find some of the slides that were that are from my camera. They're just not loading for some reason. They're on my camera, but they're not loading to my computer. So I can't share them, but that's okay. I just wanted to share what I did today. I hope that all of you, there were probably many of you that weren't even aware of what today was all about. But now that you know, do some research, tell your daughters about it, get active in your community and see what you can do to, let's get this thing back on track. We're so off track right now. And I think it's extremely scary. So thanks for joining me today on She Became Visible. And I have one ask for you. This is not I do not ask for money. This is not a monetized podcast in any way. I do this for my own enjoyment and because I love learning, and it helps give me motivation to do more research. So all I ask of you is to subscribe, like, and share. And I know that seems so crazy, but it's true. Helps the algorithm. So if you could share this with other people, tell other people about it and like it, that's all I ask. So have a great day. Have a great week. It's Monday. And thanks for sharing your day with me today. And let's go and see you later. Bye-bye.